All right. All right, Mike, what do you got for us, Mr. Jarrell?
Yeah, if you're not talking, if you could please mute yourself so we don't end up with a bunch of feedback. It'll make the recording a little better. Yeah, so we wanted to talk a little bit about Communitas, risk, adventure, and Jeff and I talked about a couple questions to sort of frame our time and our conversation together. And by the way, I'm glad we're recording this because I think most of you know Creo is over 50% bivocational or co-vocational. So there are just a lot of people, and you know, finally some people are starting to vacation a little bit, break away. Thank God for that. It's beautiful. But we're gonna kind of start off with how do we practice risk? So let me ask you, Jeff, how do you in Sanctus, how does your community practice risk?
Ooh, jumping right in. Okay, well, my wife Anna and my three little boys, we live in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I think what Jesus is really showing us in our own community in Minnesota, we're only an hour away from where George Floyd was killed, of course, Minneapolis. So we're just an hour up the freeway from there. So a lot of things are happening in our culture, in our neck of the woods here in Minnesota. When you talk about risk and Communitas, I know Tracy and I were sharing this morning, it's this idea of risk or adventure with Jesus followers that you can't really get with just, attending something. What's Jesus doing outside of us that we could join in on that's risky or adventurous? And to be honest, he's challenging our central Minnesota culture to join in those conversations with people of color, neighbors, even some black pastor friends in town. And I have had lunches and coffees, and more so than we ever have before. So thank Jesus for that. So to be honest, he's really showing us ways we as a family, my wife, my three kids, and I, can join in those conversations. So I'll just give you one quick instance. And our missional community has decided we're reaching immigrant families, refugee families. That's kind of been our ethos of our missional community. A lot of Somali families, Iraqi families, even Turkish families in our city in Minnesota. So that's been great now. But with George Floyd and all the unrest and upheaval that's happened, it's opened up a whole nother layer of risk and adventure. So we've been going out and just joining these events and rallies and marches and outdoor gatherings and just basically sitting there and just taking on a listening posture. And we've gotten some heat from different members of the white church, to be honest, and others friends that don't want to be a part of that scene, or afraid of BLM, or afraid of this or afraid of that. And so the risk right now for us, and the adventure, really, it's an adventure for us. Not so much risky, I guess, but the adventure is really just joining our community and the pain that they're feeling, the problems that they see going on. What's provoking our city? I think that's a good question we're asking. What's really provoking us, and what do we see happening that we can join in? And so just last week we had a great conversation with like 200 people in our city, and Jesus's Jesus's words were being taught. People were speaking about Jesus freely with a microphone, and some of his teachings, and loving one another, and the first shall be last, the last shall be first, serve one another. So this was from our public gathering, people just sharing from a microphone. And so we were talking about Jesus with people we never met before, just praying for people and engaging conversation. So that's been an adventure, and of course many of you are living that adventure in your city. But for Minnesota, where it's so close to home, it's been quite the adventure, and getting some pushback, some heat from other friends that may not want to join those conversations. So it's been fun, adventurous.
Yeah, that's good, man. I'll share a few things. The first is I think new habits for people, because it doesn't start with I think I just want to be risky. So I'm going to go out and be this new risky, dangerous person or something. I think for most people, to create a culture or practice risk and see that happen through an entire community of people, healthy rhythms where people live out their faith in practical ways, where they practice their faith, not just talk about their faith, but they practice their faith, and they do that habitually. So if you have rhythms, for us, we do rhythms called reach, which is rest, eat, act of love, confess, and home. And so if we have a rhythm, for example, of eating with people that are a part of our community and outside of our community every week, then people get used to hospitality. You get used to hospitality, you include people around your table that are in your neighborhood, workplace, people that are different than you. We get really intentional with who we're inviting around our table, or what tables we're joining, or what coffee shops or pubs or virtual pubs or whatever the heck that is, right? Whatever we're doing. When you do that, you make friends. When you make friends, you end up doing whatever it takes to love and protect and serve and care for your friends, right? So I don't think my wife ever would have pictured herself knocking on the door of a drug house, banging on the door to try to get someone out. My wife is a risk averse, sort of safety, security kind of person, right? But she's banging on the door of a drug house because her friend is a recovering addict and has slipped back. This is a person that she has gotten to know, share the table with. We have 6 people in our micro church that are recovering addicts. And they're saying during this time with COVID, we're losing people left and right, because for the recovery community, it's they're feeling isolated. And so there's depression, there's suicide during this time period. So we got to think of ways to get risky to connect with people, whether it's social distancing in a park or whatever it takes, to be there and care for people, because we know that their actual physical life could be in danger if we don't, right? So I started with rhythms just to say, I think we need new habits of blessing people, new habits of eating with and connecting with people. And as those relationships form, you'd be surprised at what you do. You'd be surprised at how dangerous you can get when you love someone and you're trying to protect someone. Think about a mom who would never do anything dangerous, but because her kid's in danger is going to, find the superhuman strength to pick up a car or something, right? You go like, I will do whatever it takes to rescue my kid, to help this person in danger because of love. The second thing I'd say to this topic is we really have to empower prophetic and apostolic type of people. And when a lot of communities have exiled them, so hopefully you haven't. If you haven't, and they're part of your community, you look around and see these people that are entrepreneurial, that are wanting to create things and start things and form things, giving them voice, opportunity, and a huge piece of it is culture of experimentation. Try things. Fail at 20 of them, or it's not even failure, it's learning. Try 20 different things, learn, modify it, change things. But giving apostolic types the freedom to create, to attempt things, giving prophetic people the freedom to stand up and stand out against things, and to step up and speak up for people that are being mistreated and marginalized, then you'll find yourself in risky type scenarios. So I think new habits, but also empowering the voices that tend to be riskier, I think is a really important one too.
I like how you said about prophetic people, and I know some of us on this call are more, we hear things from God, and we need to share them, or else we're gonna burst open, right? And one of the ways, just to bounce off you, Mike, real quick, then we'll do some Q&A here. But one of the ways, one of our friends challenged us in this kind of, he's a prophetic person, so he just spoke right into this whole idea of practicing risk. He said, okay, in the next, I forget how he said it, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever, in this this next season of life, you're going to set up a coffee or a lunch with someone in our city that serves our city or looks after the well-being of our city. So it could be someone in law enforcement, someone in government, someone in, a social service provider. So my guy was our local Promise Neighborhoods leader guy. I don't know what they call themselves. But we had a great lunch and got to know a story, and that's how we got connected into that outdoor event together. And but just I would say that's a good action step, is just find a coffee or find a lunch, and you have to initiate that, of course. So that's kind of scary and risky. But with someone that's serving your city, that's not a part of the church. That's just serving your city and for the well-being of your city. I think we have a huge common ground as the church with those types of people to partner. But I would love to hear from any thoughts on that, guys. Any questions or thoughts, or what Mike and I just shared? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have something brilliant. Tracy.
I don't have something brilliant, but I would like to ask, and I think I know the answer, but so if you're seeking to develop communitas in a church culture, and I appreciate what you were saying, Mike, in terms of healthy habits, developing a risk favorable environment. But I don't think it's so much, individual A saying, yeah, I did something risky, and individual B saying, I did something risky. But isn't there something about a group or several engaging in something risky together? And then out of that adventure, there's now this owned, shared sense of, that was great. Man, do you remember the time that we, so how do we promote missional behavior, missional activities that people can engage in together? Am I right in that together assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's much easier to do it with a group of people who came to faith as a part of what you're doing. If you have a missional community or micro churches or that sort of thing, and the people that you're reaching become a part of the community because you befriended them and they began to walk with you and they came to faith, and it was a journey, and now it's all they know is what you're doing. But if you try to get a group of religious people to kind of go off on this exciting missional journey, I find that religious people and people that come from a church background love control. And they're very afraid of environments that they can't control. And if you stick a person from a Christian background in a room full of people, and there's some sort of barbecue or party or something happening, and half the people are dropping F-bombs like crazy, and people are just not religious in there, and then you have religious people in the same room, you can feel the tension. Like, you can see it on their face, you can feel it in their posture. It's really awkward. And so I think starting to venture them out and sort of shock them in environments that are going to stretch them to think differently. Also, understanding that people move at the Holy Spirit's pace in their life.
Absolutely.
Not mine or yours. And so if we're gonna engage in environments that we don't control with people who may or may not share our faith, we're gonna end up in these settings where people are telling dirty jokes and dropping F-bombs and getting wasted and going outside and smoking a joint and whatever else. And religious people really struggle with that sort of thing happening because they feel like they have to control the environment. But to be on mission and engage in environments that are sort of risky or dangerous for the sake of seeing people experience the freedom that's found in Jesus.
That's why we keep our hookah pipe close by. For real.
Good job.
Desi had a thought on the text. She wanted to weigh in on kind of letting people know you and understanding you. And Jesse, you got some thoughts on that to kind of back up what Mike was saying there?
Yeah. So just for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jesse Cruikshank, and I help lead 100 movements, and liminality communitas is my area of expertise here. First in a wilderness ministry, and now to the church for the last 8 years. And it's a great question, Tracy, and Mike did a great job. I think the church, the greatest risk for people in the church is to be known. And the way that we have church and the way that we do church is designed for us not to be known. And so what I found for the pastors that in the parts of the nation that I oversee for my denomination, encouraging them to get to know each other and taking those small steps there within the walls of the church works as baby steps to help them then get to know people outside the walls of the church. Because like Mike was talking about, if you're all performance oriented and shelled up inside the church, when you go outside of the church, everybody outside the church knows that. And that's why I don't like church people. That's why I don't go to church, right? So if they can be brave in themselves and authentic inside, then that helps them be brave and authentic outside. And then we realize the walls of the church are just completely unnecessary. And we can love people well. So for people inside the church, that's kind of where I've had to help them start, because they're just jerk faces when they go outside of the walls of the church sometimes.
Yes.
I'm just being recorded, so I'm sorry. I'm an Enneagram 8.
Keep it real. Keep it real.
Whole language.
I am too. Yes.
So I don't want to introduce my unsaved friends to people who are going to be mean to them and judge them, right? Because I have been cultivating with them for a long time to help them see God is good and Jesus is good. So I have to kind of help my church people.
The secondary. That's so good, Jesse. That's so good. The secondary thought behind what Tracy asked and what you just said, Jesse, about we can all be jerk faces sometimes, right? And but if you're with a group of your best Jesus follower friends, one of you might not be a jerk face at the given moment. So I like staying, doing this together. But one of the questions Mike had on here, and I'll just read the next one, is, and Tracy mentioned this, how do you find the right kind of risk or the right kind of adventure that you can do together? And that's one of our passions too. Mike, do you want to kind of bounce off that question from Tracy and what Jesse shared now? How do you collectively, how can we discover what Jesus is asking us to do together as a group of amigos and amigas?
Yeah, but before we go there, I think Jesse said something that I thought was just a really good, it's probably good to pause with this for a second, and that is people being vulnerable. The church should be the safest place in the world for you to sin.
Right.
And I don't really find that to be the case. It's like the least safe place in the world for people to sin or crash and burn, right? Because if we're a culture of grace, so that's why when I mentioned our rhythms and these practices, that's why we added confession. It actually we started with hear, home, eat, active love, rest, and then we realized, people can turn disciple making rhythms into legalistic checklist pretty easily and quickly. So we better add confess. And so then we switched the letters around like any good acronym, made it reach. And we had this C, confess,
Voila.
piece in there. Yep, there it is. And the crazy thing is, I can't tell you how many people say whenever they connect with our community, one of the first impressions that I got is how free people are to talk about all kinds of mistakes and failures. And I've never been a part of a community like this. And then just as I'm with some of the guys that I'm friends with that are in our community, with some of the guys in my neighborhood who don't share our faith, I'll share one story. We're sitting around a fire pit, and these guys are taking turns just like bitching about their wives, like guys oftentimes do, and girls do it too, right? They're sitting around the fire pit just complaining about their spouses one by one. Well, my wife, boom. The next guy, well, my wife, boom. The next guy's like, oh, you think you got it bad? Try being married to the same one for 20 years. Boom, like drops the next one. And then one of the guys looks at me like it's my turn to complain about my wife. And I was like, I actually kind of like my wife. And the guy goes, yeah, but can't she be a bitch? And I said, well, yeah, but I can be a dick. And then all of a sudden, all the guys around the fire pit started confessing. And they were like, yeah, cheers to that.
He's
So
speaking my language. He's speaking my language.
Then it turned this fire pit time into like this weird time of confession where guys started like opening up about their failures and mistakes. And then days later, I got a text from one of the guys, hey, can we grab wings? I want to talk. And he starts opening up about his marriage. And so confession is incredibly disarming. And I think Jesse hits it big time when we think about risk and adventure, putting yourself out there and making yourself of no reputation and being a fool for the sake of Christ and humbling ourselves in our brokenness and inability. That is so incredibly countercultural and takes courage. It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
But
So
Jeff is great because he calls me the hippie of this movement. And so Jeff's great because he pulls us back on track with Mike. We actually have like a template here of questions we want to ask. So take me back, bro.
Oh man, that's why we're a good team, bro. I love that, guys. And I just want to throw out there this idea of, again, going back to what Tracy shared earlier. How do you take a bunch of individuals and coalesce and try to synthesize as a family on the mission of Jesus, or finding, we just phrased it, finding the right risk together. I'm going to still volunteer at this thing. You're going to still do your thing, Jesse, over here. Joe's going to do his thing. Keith's going to do his thing. And that's all fine and good. But what could we do together? Or what is Jesus asking us to do together? So Mike, could you help? You've led missional communities, micro churches, movements. How do people come together? How does that even happen? How could a leader or a servant leader coalesce, synthesize, and help just begin that process of trying to get to a common risk or an adventure to go? Like, I'm thinking Lord of the Rings type epic, how do we do that? Who's going to be the Gandalf, Mike?
Yeah. And bro, I think that's part of where people honestly get tripped up, is they feel like it has to be big, grand. And so they do nothing. And if you look at this, at this time period of COVID, thinking like a missionary instead of a church leader or a church planter or a small group leader or something like that. If you think like a missionary, you look around and say, what do we have to do in this season? And so one person looks out and goes, oh man, we've got COVID, we've got people that are unemployed. What if we did a 5K and everybody participated in their own neighborhood and they raised money, and we took all the money and gave it to families that are unemployed right now in our neighborhood? Awesome, right? Small, no big deal. Just did like a GoFundMe, raised $6,000 in a week, turn around and gave it to a couple of families in need. All right. One guy has a brewery and goes, what can I do during this time? I'm gonna turn my brewery distillery, I'm gonna turn the distillery into a hand sanitizer factory. So this is what people need. Then he turns around and does that. He's giving hand sanitizer to first responders. He's giving hand sanitizer to hospitals. He's got DC's calling them, White House is calling, asking for hand sanitizer from them. And it's just because he turned around and said, what are the needs? What do I have? What's happening in this season with COVID? What does it look like to be a good missionary during this season? And I think if we think like missionaries and look around at what's happening, instead of think like, how do I run a successful group and then maybe get people on mission? If we start with mission and we look around us and say, what are the needs? What's happening in a community? What is the Spirit of God doing? I think that the answers can be much more obvious than we realize.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I know one of the guys in my local city, he has a ministry where any kind of refugee or immigrant family that comes to live here, he gets the notifications through social services, and then he calls us, and so he puts out the word on a text message to all of us with pickup trucks and trailers, and he's like, meet me at this parking lot in the middle of nowhere at this time of night or whatever. And so we just show up. But I think one of the things how we've seen people coalesce around, like you said, Mike, if you start with that mission, like Mike said, if you start with that mission, and the first person that says, I want to join you, I think us as the leader types or whoever those people are, if we're good at saying, look at what,
Did everybody lose Jeff's audio? Yeah, me too.
Yes.
I wondered if it was just me, but somebody could have done a really awesome voiceover while he was, that would have been pretty sweet.
Am I still gone?
You're back, Jeff.
No, you're back.
Okay.
You're back.
So help me, Mike. Where did I lose my amazing dramatic? Where did I leave off?
I don't know, dude. I was laughing and I totally lost track of everything that was going on.
Okay. So about the whole thing about so he sends out a text message to serve these refugee families, and we all join him. And I think as leaders, it's important for us to say, hey, look at what these guys are doing. Anyone else want to join them? And instead of trying to recreate a bunch of different things, we're trying to like bring people to support that person, friend, whoever it is, and try to help them kind of build community around that, rather than coming up with their own programs or our own ideas. Or so long story short, there was about 10 guys hauling couches one night, and these Somali families, friends of ours, they're part of our community now, and they've been discussing Jesus and having great Somali tea together, and the wives hang out in the kitchen, you know, because that's primarily expression of Somali culture, is cooking together and being together in the kitchen. And the fellas, we go out and we help people move, and we help people move their furniture around, and it's just been a really cool, natural way to coalesce people around a mission, and something we didn't come up with. It came right out of our people. It's been quite a fun adventure.
I love that, man. Sometimes it's just simple steps of you look out and say, okay, a group of us will get together at a local coffee shop. Everybody this week bring an extra $30. We're just going to bless the waitress with $200 tip, right? Things like that just simple, like get a group of people outside of their normal rhythms, doing things they don't normally do, and starting to think a little bit differently. Or you go to the park and you see a whole group of Indian guys playing cricket, and you don't know how to play. And then you go, guys, can you teach me and my friends here how to play cricket? We don't know, we're idiots. And then just go out there and be a dummy and look ridiculous, and listen, because people love teaching something to other people. So go out and become a beginner. It's things like that cause us to step out. It's a risk that gets us outside of our normal routines and opens up a bridge to relationship. And once you get there, I mean, you do whatever God calls you to do. But listening to the Spirit is huge. Truly, I was talking about it this morning. I feel stressed if I go about my day trying to get everything done. But the irony is I get more done when I slow down. It's crazy. Right. It's a crazy thing. I actually get less done when I speed up, and I get more done when I slow down. If I slow down and listen to the Spirit, I'm actually more effective, and I'm doing the right things. And we pause and say, Holy Spirit, what are you doing in my neighborhood? What are you doing in my city? What do you want to do with my friends? What do you want to do in this workplace? And pause and listen. Too many of us run out trying to be effective, just doing something, that we don't pause to listen and allow the Spirit to infuse these Holy Spirit fresh ideas, right? The danger in a conversation like this is we run out with our own ideas instead of pausing to allow the Spirit to create something fresh.
Could some of you weigh into that a little bit for about, 4 or 5 minutes? Just how do you listen to the Spirit with your people? Because you guys are all part of some kind of expression of the church, a church family that you're localized with. How do you hear from the Spirit together? How do you coalesce or make a coalition around a given risk or a given adventure, building Communitas? How have you seen that work in your own experience?
Well, for me, one of the things, Mike, you used the word obvious. Like for me, a lot of times if I'm really struggling to find something or think of an idea, it doesn't always work. But when God just kind of opens up my eyes and shows me something that's already right there in front of me, is what works. Like a little over a year ago, I was invited to a wing night with some, some guy friends. None of them go to my church or anything like that. They're just friends that I've made through the rec center because I've done a lot of things through sports and through bus driving and all this kind of stuff. So they invited me to wing night, and I'm like, wow, I don't know. There's like 10, 15 guys there. I don't know. And it turns out we ended up doing this wing night once a month over the past year. Now, it's not always the same guys, but slowly during that year, I was like, is it okay if I invite some other guys to this? And they're like, yeah. So like, I start bringing some guys from my church, and then some guys that I'm trying to reach are starting to come. Now it's, it's always different guys that are coming, but over the course of the past year, some of the guys have solidified and some of them will come every time. And like this past time, it was the first time that we did it since COVID started. So now we're able to eat together outside. We're just chowing down on wings, and like 9 of the guys out of the 10 go to my church now, or at least have come to the church at least like once. And almost all of them have joined within this past year. So it was like a 9-to-1 ratio. There's still one guy that originally invited me to it that doesn't come to our church, but he came once. But it's like, so for me, it's like God showing me there's a 9-to-1 ratio here, Keith. Like there's 9 believers and 1 non-believer. And if that's what it takes, that's what I'm going to do. So that, it's just an obvious thing that God did. He just opened my eyes to a simple thing that I didn't even really have to think of. But he's turned that into a ministry.
Jeff, Keith is like the Viking of the South, bro. Like he's got this cool, he's south of you, but he's got this, but I got to tell you, he is doing cool stuff with turning his property into this like flower garden farm. Talk about that. That's cool, man.
Well, that's mainly my wife's. I'm just the farmhand, but yeah. So we were really blessed that one of the reasons we moved to where we are is because we got to sort of inherit the property that my wife grew up in. And I say sort of because that's a long story. We still had to pay for it, but we got the family discount. And so we've basically turned five of the 10 acres into mission, basically, where my wife started this flower farm. I get to be the farm hand. I get to drive the tractor, and like last year, like all summer, every Sunday we did what we called Faith in the Fields, where we would have our church gathering down at the flower field. And like any money that came in, we were like, all sales today for flowers, support mission here in Harford County. And so it's just stuff like that. Like the whole point of the flower farm is really to connect with people. I mean, yeah, it would be nice to make a couple extra bucks, but to help support our family. But mainly it's just really just to connect with people. So we're still kind of waiting for that to take off. We're starting to, waiting to see the fruits of that. But everything, I talk with Mike about this all the time. It takes time. You cannot build relationships in a hurry. You can't build Communitas in a hurry. It just takes time.
Mm-hmm. That's a great thought.
Yeah,
that's a great.
And that's the beauty is Keith. He's a great guy. If any of you guys want to talk to at some point, because all of his people have come out of the harvest. He's connected with all of them either through running the local rec league and this flower garden and bus drivers. It's like all people that he's met, not coming from other churches. And you're just Viking of the South, bro. You're doing it, man. Awesome.
Keith, your story about resourcing, because so you said something about in the fields when you were gathered, you were saying, hey, let's help put into this mission, or let's gather some funds and some resources to put into our Communitas or this shared mission that we have together. Is that kind of right? You kind of took some collection or got stuff together for the mission, right?
Well, all the money all the money we got on those days went to the church.
Yeah.
So, and right now we are the missionaries. So it's,
yeah.
It's going to, like we put out a lot more money into the mission than we take.
Yeah. But to serve your county though, right?
Yes. Yeah. Through mission. Now in the future, we would like to do specific things. Like if we want to give to such and such, we definitely will do that. Yeah.
The reason I bring that up is our last point here is once you've been able to identify a shared risk or a shared adventure together, now it's kind of the practical nuts and bolts of how do we do this. And I know Jesse, I was looking at the text, Jesse and I think it was Joe, they were talking about, okay, we got to organize it. We also want it to be organic, right? And
Right.
relationships. And how is that balance between the organic and the organized kind of come together on that and the practical, how do we do this now together? So let's talk about that, Mike, a bit, pick your brain a bit. So we do it together, we identify it, and we start doing it together. And I like when a leader can say, okay, in the next month, here's what we're going to do together, and we're all going to do this together, kind of thing. So we're all kind of putting ourselves on the hook. So as we do it together, you know, we talk about you celebrate it together. Maybe use a gathering to celebrate what Jesus has done through the adventure. We've talked about things like, you know, and Keith brought it up. We resource it together. So let's have a brainstorming night where we throw all our resources on a whiteboard so we can resource this risk, this adventure that we're going to be on together. Mike, are there any other ideas? Like, how do you go about just the practical nuts and bolts of doing the thing together and keep doing the thing together, not reverting back just to a glorified Bible study or whatever?
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I think if you start with mission, if you start with a mission, then you end up needing all the different players, all the different gifts. You've got to learn different things at different times, because the people that you're reaching have different questions, right? So often we start with what we want to teach, but it's not what they are ready to hear yet. They don't have ears to hear that yet. So adults do learn on a need-to-know basis. And I do think taking the time to understand where people are coming from and intersecting God's story with their story. And if we start with mission, it's all going to come out. And the irony is, if you want to do some sort of Bible study on apologetics or something, right? We've talked about this, Jeff. You want to do some sort of Bible study on apologetics with a group of people from a church. I don't know. It's sort of stale. It really is. It's sort of stale. Maybe you can try to make it exciting. However, if you have some neighbors or coworkers that don't believe in Jesus, they're skeptics, they have questions, but some sort of curiosity, they're ready to kind of dip their feet in, and you're going to get together around a fire pit to share your story and their story and get to know each other a little bit more, and they know what they're coming into. You're going to come into that environment trying to answer questions that they were asking 2 weeks ago or a month ago. And it's going to drive you to a deeper study of topics on apologetics than anything that you would have had if it was just a theoretical Bible study, just in case you run into some non-believer someday, right? If you start with mission and you're going to hang out with Dave on Friday night, then you're going to be really urgent trying to understand, how do I answer the questions that Dave has, because I'm going to sit with Dave on Friday night and he needs answers to these questions. So I really do believe starting with mission, but I think thinking about either a place that needs to be restored or a people that want something more, that you take them on this journey.
I know Tracy just mentioned here on the comments, you mentioned the phrase adults they kind of need to know before they go do, or the mission is there already, and then they need to know something to do the mission. So Tracy, would you mind commenting on that a bit, kind of what you heard there and kind of why your heart went all pitter patter there?
Well, I loved Mike's comment that adults learn on a need-to-know basis. That just kind of ping, in my brain. I thought, oh, that was brilliant. That's absolutely true. We can be so comfortable and so passive until we're placed in a situation or setting where, well, now I need to know the gospel if I'm actually going to have to share it. Now I need to, know something in order to function in this environment. So just being creative about putting our people or inviting our people into situations that cause them their learning curve to have to skyrocket. They have a felt need for gaining some expertise or some knowledge that they just simply didn't have to use before. So I was going to ask the question, and I think this is another great area. So we're in a racially tense, charged season of our nation with some deep-rooted needs that have been exposed and need to be addressed. And the church, ideally, is the community on the face of the planet that has the ultimate answers to these issues, but we're characteristically not modeling real well, and we're characteristically not speaking into those relational dynamics very well. So a need to know has been created, an opportunity for the body of Christ to gain some expertise and a risk in engaging people of color and people that are different than we are, and minister healing in just being able to talk about some of these issues. So I think that's a profound area for potential Communitas building.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Go ahead, man.
No, you got it, Mike. Anybody can jump in. Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely agree with you, Tracy, and I feel like people in the church world tend to be so obsessed with Rome or Jerusalem. You know, they the same way that when Jesus was here and people wanted, the religious people wanted Jesus to fix the political problems of the culture, right? I think that people are so obsessed with a political answer instead of an alternate kingdom. An alternate kingdom. We are an alternate kingdom. The church is an alternate kingdom. We have a different king, and it's not Donald. We have a different king. His name is Jesus. And if the people of God got really excited about the kingdom of God instead of the kingdom of, America,
Whatever,
the kingdom
yeah.
of God, right? I think we would create an alternate kingdom that would seek out people the same way that Jesus went out of his way to seek out the woman in Samaria. That we're gonna go after people that are different than us, that think like us, that act different than us. We're gonna go after people that are sinners, right? Not just people that we think are good and that we agree with. And so I think the people of God have got to change the mindset from we need to fix things in America to we need to be an alternate kingdom. We have to be an alternate kingdom, and seeing diversity and diversity, as Luther said recently, Jeff, to us, diversity isn't just black, white. It's young, old, it's rich, poor, it's across the board. If we want to take a net and basically get a random sampling of whatever's in the neighborhood, right? That's what the church should resemble, everything that's in the net, basically, the dragnet kind of image. Right. And if we do that well as a community of Jesus followers, then we're light to the world. We show them what diversity looks like, because it's not going to happen passively. We have to pursue it. We've got to pursue people that are different than us on all levels.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to echo that with Jessie stabbing here on our checks. And some of you that are listening later might not see this, but she just, I want her to use her own words too, but the kingdom never trades into the powers of the world. Like you might just echoing what you're saying, Mike, we're always called to be the other. So Jessie, I know you got to run in a couple minutes, but we need the expert of Communitas to kind of finish that thought there and kind of piggyback off what Mike and Tracy are saying.
I mean, Communitas is the experience of the kingdom. Right? I mean, you can be on mission and you can do stuff and Jesus still isn't your Lord, and you are not necessarily building the kingdom. You're doing it of your own agenda. And it's like really hard and it's wonky and it doesn't scratch the itch and nobody like comes to Jesus through it, maybe. Right? But when we experience the kingdom, I call that Communitas, because the kingdom is a mindset and a relationship with one another. And then when we get together, then it's, then we'll have ecclesia. But otherwise, we're always supposed to live in that state. So, yeah, man, I mean, that's the kingdom and Communitas are the same thing for me, which is why it's my great passion. So Mike's doing a great job.
Jessie, would you say, you mentioned the word ecclesia now, going from Communitas, and this is kind of our last final point, going from Communitas to ecclesia. So we start with this great adventure and risk that Jesus has called my wife and I into, and I invite a couple others to join me. And all of a sudden we're doing this and experiencing kingdom-sized stuff like grace and mercy shared and relationships and all that. How does it go? And this is not for Jessie, but how does it go from my wife and I and a couple friends, working towards this greater goal into experiencing ecclesia. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Well, I'll throw out one thought and then y'all can like correct me and finish it because I have to totally go. But for me, the kingdom is like the prairie and ecclesia is the herd. We're always in the prairie and the prairie is bigger than the herd, right? So I'm a Western girl, right? So to me, it's a buffalo herd. But so sometimes we're together and we call that ecclesia, but we're never supposed to leave the prairie. We're never supposed to be outside the mindset of communitas and kingdom. So we've just made the church too big and the kingdom too small.
Love that. Let's I know, Jess, you got to run, but thank you so much. Let's bounce off that, guys. What did you hear? What do you think? How do we go from starting with the mission, start with the adventure, moving into the life patterns and rhythms of church, ecclesia? And is that a shared goal of ours?
I'll just say something. It's been said, prayer is the lungs of the church, but I think heart is the mission. The heart is the mission of the church. And I think what I hear is, fundamentally, when I talk to you guys, the values, the theology that you guys express in both what you do, what you talk about, is fundamentally, the architecture of it is different than a lot of what's going on in the church. The questions you're asking are different because, like Mike said, you're actually talking about thinking like a missionary, thinking about how do we actually find people, bring them in, catch the fish, and then cut and clean them in a healthy environment where there's real vulnerability and transparency, and people feel like they can be honest and be real. C.S. Lewis said the greatest argument for Christ is a Christian. The greatest argument against Christ is a Christian. Romans 2 says, because of you, the name of God's been blasphemed among the nations. Gandhi walked into a church when he visited America and saw segregation and turned and walked away and said, there's no way. There's no way this is right, because he was right. It's just not right. And so how are we misrepresenting in our theology and practice being in the prairie, being in the field and going to the people? And so I just want to say I love this and I'm so thankful that I've found you guys and have other people that are having these kinds of discussions.
I would just echo that, Jason. This has been amazing. Before we close the recording though, any of these questions, where do you begin with a risk, with an adventure? How do you coalesce or synthesize that around a group of friends? And then also the practical nuts and bolts of executing that together and living that out together. Joe, Keith, Mike, I'm looking at Kevin. Any thoughts at all before we wrap up? We have a few more minutes and then we'll close our recording. I think that's a silent. I don't know if you're talking, you have to unmute yourself too. Keith, were you talking?
I wasn't. I was thinking though.
Okay.
No, I was just saying it's just something that, like, for me, I'm a very impatient person. And the one thing that I've learned, I kind of already said it, but it just takes time. Like, for me, I've been here in this area for 3.5 years now. And in my mind, we should be, at 40,000 people. But we're not anywhere close to that. But we're building relationships and we're getting to know people that don't know Jesus and they're slowly coming to the faith. So it's just something that takes time. And like when you're talking about Communitas, like you can't, like for me, I'll give you the best example is Lord of the Rings. I never read the books. Okay. So I just jumped in and watched the movies and I didn't get it. They were so long. I'm like, when is this battle going to be over? Well, the relationships form during those really long battles. The Communitas forms when you're taking those risks and are on mission together. And it's just something that cannot be hurried. It's just something that you figure out together. And it's, like our wing night. We've never opened up a Bible at our wing night in a year, and we probably won't ever, but we've had some great spiritual conversations. And some people have started to, come to church and like we're wrestling with different things and it's messy at times. And yeah, people throw the F-bomb out every wing night several times. Some guys drink probably a little too much. I don't drink at all at our wing nights because I always save room for wings. I like beer, but if I drink 2 beers, then I don't have enough room to eat my 20 wings, you know? So but it's just, it's messy.
It's more, Keith, it's more like The Hobbit than the Lord of the Rings then.
Yeah. But it's just, you know, and I got to tell myself I can't be in a hurry. This might develop into something more. It might not. This might just be a tool that God uses to bring people in, but it just takes time.
Yeah, it does. Any other final thoughts, Kevin, Joe? I want to give you a chance to weigh in a little bit on building Communitas. Any final thoughts?
Well, I would just say for us, experientially, something that's gone really well is just having a completely open house, an open home to anyone and everyone at all times, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's literally people at my house probably 5 days a week. You know, there are people there right now, swimming and hanging out with my wife. And one cool thing that's come from that is I just left a very conservative church community, you know, Reformed evangelical church community, and, you know, sort of linked up with Jason, and we're doing, you know, an organic church movement, and bringing the power of having an open house. It's funny, man, because I've brought people that I never thought would have come. And because the churches are closed, people are like, well, we'll just go to the Rumsies on Sunday, you know, and go check it out. And just having a bunch of people from, you know, the sort of, for lack of a better way to put it, the home church community that have been doing that for a long time and have that heart and are just kind of super casual and, you know, and hooking up with, you know, my guys who are really conservative and, you know, went to the conservative colleges and the conservative churches and are lawyers and this and that, you know, and they look at things a certain way, and having these people hook up. It's funny. Jason made a comment to me yesterday where one of my most conservative friends that has been coming around a long time, Jason said, you know, I've seen him go from like a 1 to a 2 to like a 3 to a, you know, and I've got these guys all interacting with each other now, and they're all friends. And it's just interesting to see two completely different types of Christians sort of starting to come together and interact and start to like each other and be like, hey, they're not weird after all, you know. They're kind of cool, man. This is great, you know. As a matter of fact, I want to go back to our church and tell them that this isn't as crazy as we thought it was, you know, or whatever. And so it's just really cool to have that open door and invite people from all sides to always just be able to come.
Yeah.
We'll have
Kevin, you're identifying something really cool, Kevin, of how do you care for that group of people, then opening your home, having the dinners, inviting conversation. As people are out doing the mission together, what you're doing, Kevin, is so core. Like, we've got to still care for people, let people rub shoulders with people that are also doing the mission, being able to just breathe together, especially in this COVID craziness. So, you know, whatever the size of the group is, if it's a backyard or if it's your house or living room, it's so good just to be able to be together. And really that's the function of shepherding, is when it comes after the mission, right? Is good shepherding happens when the sheep are already out in the field doing their thing and they can come and get a drink of water. So that's really cool that you're doing that.
People are more apt to let you in and hear what you have to say in that sort of an environment. You know, it's just really easy to connect.
Yeah.
So.
That's good. So I'm gonna stop recording here, but I just want to say to our listeners, join us for the next webinar in a couple of weeks, couple of Wednesdays. We'll put this on YouTube, Creo Collective on YouTube, on Facebook. We're all over the place, and we just want to connect with more people. So share it, and you'll, on our Facebook page, Creo Collective, you'll see the next webinar on multiplying everything. So thanks for joining us, and have a great day.